Life can get hectic, weighing you down. You've traded in your smile for an unbotoxed frown. Ditch the blues, tune on in. I'm sure you will agree. When life hands you lemons, just suck it and see. You are tuned in to another episode of Suck It and See, the podcast that explores life's many messy lessons through the lenses of curiosity, hope, and humour. Let's face it, folks, shit happens. But if we can learn something, grow from the experience, and have a good old belly laugh along the way, isn't that what life's all about? I'm your host, Nathy Gaffney. Thanks for joining me. Let's jump in. Hi, lovelies. Welcome to the Suck It and See podcast. Nathy Gaffney. It's a journey getting this podcasting world to happen. My life, I know, having just turned 60 and being able to reflect on several decades of being on this planet, has not been a straightforward linear path. There's twists and turns, there's fuck up, there's failures, there's fabulous, and everything in between. And it's been the same with my podcast. While I deal with other life issues, podcast takes a back seat. While I deal with relationship issues, newsletter takes a back seat. While I deal with the newsletter and working and making an income, friendships take a back seat. It's that's just the way it rolls. But when I do turn up, I turn up wholeheartedly with something that I believe genuinely is worth sharing. And this episode that I am about to share with you, and it's part one of a two-part episode, I believe is absolutely worth sharing. Everything I share is honestly based on my own experience. I treat myself as a bit of a petri dish, really, in this space. That's kind of what Suck It and See is all about. It's like, I've sucked it, I've seen it, and this is what I found out, metaphorically speaking, of course. So I'm sitting down in these next two episodes with a woman called Briony Pilkington. She is a body-centered psychotherapist. Now, a lot of words relating to trauma have entered the mental and physical well-being lexicon in the last couple of years. Trauma, stored trauma, polyvagal theory, more words than I can remember as I'm doing this intro. And I started my own body healing journey with Briony about 18 months ago. And as I've been drawn more and more into that world, I've seen more and more places and spaces where it's being explored, where people are curious about it, where people are starting to educate themselves about it. But the practice of working with a somatic or body-centered psychotherapist is still a little bit people like, well, what actually happens? What am I supposed to do? What can I expect? Well, over the next two episodes, we're hoping to shed some light on that for you. So Briony is going to talk about her journey into becoming a body-centered psychotherapist. And you'll find a lot of it is not just theoretical, but it's also experiential. Like, her journey informs her practice. And then in the second episode, we're kind of going to lift the lid on my journey. So we're going to talk about our journey together, both as client and practitioner, so that you'll get a sense of what it's like to go through a therapeutic journey with a body-centered psychotherapist. So without further ado, thanks for turning up. Let's jump in.
Yeah.
Hi, Briony.
Hello.
It's so great to have you here. Normally it's me under your magnifying glass, but today I get to have you under my magnifying glass, which is super exciting for me, because I have wanted to take a bit of a dive into the journey that you and I have shared in probably coming up to about 18 months now since we actually first met. And given what I do professionally in that coaching and facilitation and mindset and well-being space, all in the corporate space, we have been hearing more and more and more the introduction of language around how, polyvagal theory, nervous system dysregulation, trauma, stored trauma, epigenetics, all of this sort of stuff. So it's language that is coming into kind of the everyday talk, and I think particularly since COVID, that light was shone on people's mental well-being, and body psychotherapy is something that is really powerful, and it's been around for a while, but it hasn't really been in the mainstream. And I think people are a whole lot more curious about it now. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to share some time with you, and for you to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, what body psychotherapy is. And also later on in the episode, it might be part 2, but we might get to it today, is to unpack my journey, or our journey together as client and practitioner, and have a little bit of a talk about that, so that people can understand how it works and how it might work for them. So welcome, Briony Pilkington.
Thank you for having me, Nathan.
So let's start at the very beginning. Body-centered psychotherapy. Help us understand. Most of us know what psychotherapy is. Where does the body come into it?
So the body, as you mentioned, this is a way of working with therapy, of working with healing, we could call it, that has been around for some time, but the addition of the body actually came around more like in the 50s. Wilhelm Reich actually founded body psychotherapy. His well-known book, Character Analysis, is in the Harvard Medical School library now, which is an absolute boon. He's no longer with us, yet all his books were burned and he was put in jail in the 50s. He was a bit of a revolutionary growing up on the farm. He's actually an Austrian psychiatrist and a student of Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud is known for that iceberg theory about how much of our consciousness is actually below the surface. So Reich went that step further. Freud used to have his clients, or he probably called them patients in that day and age, laying down on a sofa quite a far distance away from him, and wouldn't even look at them. It was all about the talking. It was all about this more analytical process that was very much based around the intellect and the head. So he kind of had this gist that there's more to what we say and who we are than what presents in this surface level. Yet Reich discovered that by doing deep tissue body work with his clients, that they would go deeper in their therapy sessions. They would start to have feelings and emotions and memory recall, and literally connect and be able to transform from the root of the issues that was currently disturbing them in present time. So that really is, the combination of the two. The body is our map and our history and our storage center of our subconscious. So all our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and life experiences are stored from woe to go. So we might believe, of course, the body does regenerate itself, which is the beauty of how we really can transform ourselves. But in order to transform ourselves, we need to be really real with where we're starting. So whilst there's beautiful work in more mindset orientation, like you were saying in the intro, that there's a great popularity around styles more intellectually or more upward based, of, I guess, untangling and just focusing on that positive and really pumping up and building up that. Yet what I've noticed, and you mentioned about the times of COVID, is that people want more. The answers that have been prevalent are most commonly known, dare I say, in the mainstream type realm, in a more medical model, what is most frequently available. If like when I was a 14-year-old and I went to my mom, I'm like, I'm not coping. I can't handle life, but blah, 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 blah. She's, what do? You take your daughter to a doctor. So then there's a process and a protocol of what happens there. Yet, it was another 10, 12 years before I discovered body psychotherapy. And believe me, I'd been that journey of looking for answers, and I had to keep just going that layer deeper. Something would give a bit of a soothing pattern, give a bit of a panacea, like feel a bit better, but nothing really allowed me to have the tools to get to the roots of that. And that is really what body psychotherapy is about. It's not a magic bullet, but what it does is it empowers you to connect with you, so that from the inside out, there's an experience that blossoms and opens up. So you have the tools to be the author of your own life, to be so deeply connected and in tune that the vastness of the journey and the life experience has this opportunity to co-create with that we can't possibly know. So Wilhelm Reich had many students in his body psychotherapy realm, and John Periakos was one of them. He's the founder of the core energetics model of body psychotherapy, which I studied. But Alexander Lowen also, the two of them were quite journeying together, and they created what was called bioenergetics, which was more about charging and discharging, seeing the body as this bioelectric system. Just like you want to earth and ground your wires in the home so that you're safe, our body also wants to allow gravity to have us feel like we've got that stable base, like we've got a safe space in our body, as within, so without. And the ancient yogis have known for all this time, this is just our food body, this is our dense body, but our thoughts and spiritual realms and the mind, we have all these layers of energetic bodies that are around us. And it's really about having this harmony and symphony and tuning our thoughts, because no, we are not our mind, we are not our body, but we got to be aware of all of them if we want to harness them and choose.
So and I want to sort of pick up on a couple of things that you said before, which I thought were great metaphors and analogies. When we think about taking something that, as you said, Wilhelm Reich in the 50s was, his books were burned and he was thrown in jail. This subversive, dangerous ideas, all of this sort of stuff, challenging the status quo and challenging the conventional medical approach and challenging the way things have always been done. And that definitely exists today. And yet
it still does. John Periakos, the founder of body psychotherapy, just to finish one little bit, Alexander Lowen and him split because John Periakos wanted to include spirituality and the heart. That's why he called it core, which is Latin for heart. Whereas Alexander Lowen wanted to stick with what I would say a bit more dry, a bit more just the biological model of charging and discharging. And John Periakos wanted to go deeper again, because this is all about going that level deeper so that you can ground into an even more deeper truth, so that you can rise higher. The tallest buildings, those carrots, don't just have a little green bit flopping on the top of the soil. They've got something anchoring them under there. We need to be as deeply rooted and be willing to confront and to see everything.
Mm,
The more we want to expand in life, the more we need to be willing to hold space and contain for whatever there is.
mm, mm.
No conditions.
So, and that requires, well, it requires courage, as we will sort of talk about. It's not embarking on one of these journeys, for want of a better word, is not for the faint-hearted. But I before we sort of get into your journey and what brought you there, what I would like to just say to our listeners, because I know that when I work with people, there are definitely people out there who are absolutely open to the heart, the core, the spirit, the energy, the stuff beyond us that we cannot see. And I, I think those people are easily opened up to this realm of work. There are those people who need it and who want it, but because of the way their brains are wired, or their language is wired, or their culture is wired, is they find when they hear words like heart and core and spirit and depth and space, and they become a little bit disconnected. And so what I wanted to pick up on was the analogy that we talked about, and you said it beautifully. It's like we need to ground. It's like taking the electrics of a house, and if we don't bed it down and we ground it in something solid, it's going to misfire. And I think you said, early when you were saying everything counts. That's what we know now. Everything has an impact, and it brought me to the analogy or the metaphor of a computer. It quite simply is, we are a walking flesh and blood and heart and bone and energy computer. And how you program a computer, whether you put your photos and your files and your Word docs and your videos, and you've got Google Chrome, or you've got Microsoft, whatever, all of those things will make up your unique laptop, which will be, to you. And what you put in it may or may not optimize it to help it go faster, or it can slow it down. And it's often those things that we've gone, don't need that file, and we've put it in the trash, but it's still there. And I find, because I'm sort of thinking about, how do I take the story of my experience and actually be able to share it with others who don't necessarily get the esoteric language associated with deep somatic healing. And when we talk about somatic healing, or the soma is simply the body. Have I got that right?
Yeah. And I'm also hearing that, dare I say, this heartful intention of really wanting to reach all of those who need it, and to spread this tool in a
Because that's
way,
what it is. It's a tool. It's another tool
to those who may not otherwise be open to it, yet because of just a bias or
yeah, absolutely.
and judgment. And we all have judgments, whether we own them or not.
Yes.
It's just human nature. This is the irony of it all.
Yeah.
The humanity of this work is consistently and constantly humbling me.
Yeah. So let's talk about you in this for the moment. And please, I'd love you to share, if you're comfortable and you're willing, is what brought you to this work. Because I know that when we met, you've studied with a number of teachers. You've got a main one, but you've also done a psychology degree. So I'd love to hear, your trajectory, because you mentioned at the beginning you were 14, you're like, well, what's wrong with me? And off you go to the doctor, but it left you wanting. So what I'd love for you to share with our listeners, my listeners, the listeners, what was your journey, and what have been the educational kind of hoops you've jumped through to get to being a practitioner in this space?
Wow.
I know it's a big question, but hey, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
Wow.
Meaning I pay myself nothing.
Well, I will be honest.
Mm.
I thought the answer was yoga. You know, ask 14-year-old Briony what she thought the answer was, and she'd say yoga.
Mm. Yep.
So I got the gist of, by being with my body in a certain way, that there was an on-flow, more state of calm. Yet when there's an underlying neuroticism, dare I say, we can turn anything that is, you know, in intellectual terms, what we would consider healthy, we can turn it into an unhealthy practice, because it's not actually, it's not the modality, it's not the practice that saves oneself. And I am not the practitioner that saves my clients. I did not save Nathi. It wasn't my magic.
Oh my God, it's felt like it sometimes though.
So it's this collaboration. It's a meeting place. Because actually we're an addicted culture. And this is what I was like saying. I'm not going to go into the quantum physics of all this yet. You know, these molecules of emotion, this addictive tendency of wanting something outside of us to be the answer.
Well, that's the same as when you go to the GP. You know, you go, I can't sleep, give me a sleeping tablet. And years ago, the GP would. Now they're going, well, how's your sleep hygiene? And that's honestly, that's not what people who can't sleep want to hear. They don't want to hear that they have to be part of the solution. They're just like, fuck it. Just like, can't you just like give me something that'll knock me out? But yeah, we've moved on.
Yeah. So, you know, the psychotherapy element, which depending on the clients, like really a lot of my ideal clients, such as Nathi G, has done a lot of talk therapy work in the past, and they're really quite aware of their patterns, yet it's not embodied and it's not cracking through and breaking through to wisdom. They're not walking their talk, and the patterns are still there. The relationships are still, dare I say, fucked up, and the sabotage is coming in, fears, whether it's around money, security in relationship, odd sexual patterns, addictive behaviors. Like I was saying, this is all stuff that's rooted in the childhood development phases. So yes, I do have a psychology degree, but I will blatantly say that it hasn't done anything that's contributed to the work I do with clients. That was me and the more contracted young girl in me wanting some external validation. I wanted that degree. So I haven't gone ahead and gone further with honors and masters, because it would feel really out of integrity for me and an utter waste of my time. I would prefer to be living in alignment with what I really know works. And that's why the body-based therapy, which literally works with the trauma as it's stored in the body. So my story, which is, yeah, I don't quite know how to share the extent of the depths of this story.
And it's not necessary. I mean, you can just give us like as much or as little as you feel comfortable with.
I guess to give a bit of a perspective, in that this work both gives the tools to journey your life through, yet it doesn't mean that there's not going to be waves, there's not going to be challenges that come through, because we can't predict the future. You can have all the psychics in the world, and yes, I am a channel. I have clients all the time telling me, how did you know that? But I'm not God. None of us are. We are not the generator, operator, and destroyer of this whole creative universe.
Mm.
We are co-creating, and the more we're conscious of that which is in that subconscious realm and cleaning that up, then we can be a clearer vessel to create the future that we want, because it's not set. My teacher used to say that it's like, if we don't do this work, the work, and clear away that the trash cycle, then we keep recreating the trash outside of us, because our inflow equals our outflow. It's just a mirror.
Yeah, it's emptying the trash can. It's not just putting it in the trash can. It's literally emptying it out, so that you get back to that clean, cleansed kind of pure state. And from there, you can actually make different decisions.
So that is the attunement, because we're hearing more and more that the vibration of grief, the vibration of sadness, the vibration of anger, of these what we call lower vibrational emotional patterns. Everyone wants to feel joy. Everyone wants to feel love. But what are you willing to let go of in order to get it? If you've got a big lump of heavy cement in your chest, which is that grief, how can you rise and really embrace the joy?
Is that why, because people who carry around grief and sadness and trauma from early childhood, or war, or horrible things that have happened to them, can experience moments of grief and growth. Grief and growth. Oh, that's a mouthful. But is that why people find themselves kind of perpetually in that cycle of like, I can get there and now I'm just dragged down again?
I was a 21-year-old who had quit what I called the mainstream life and was out there to find myself. And my God, they just kept in the ashram and all these yoga practices. We had to keep doing this meditation thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I used to fall asleep. And you know what, in hindsight, it's because my body had so much trauma stored that I could not connect. There was so much numbness. Like I was either on or I was off. There was no nuance of in between. There was no, and that reminds me of one of your sessions, Nathan. I wonder if we could ballpark that till the end. When you started hearing all these different notes in the music, it's like the ability to connect with the nuances of life. Life itself does not change, yet we are able to connect to the vibrancy, to the full spectrum, to the full range of feeling. We're able to feel that grief. We're able to cry. And then the next moment, because those dark, heavy storm clouds that were in our chest have just been lightened, just like in the sky. They're all gray and dark and gloomy. and they can make it over the mountain and rise to the greater heights. So that meditation, really, the concept of meditation is to be the observer, to be the witness. So in sessions with clients, and this is how I work with myself in my own meditation, is it's really about being the witness of having this, what some people call equanimous mind. Look, honestly, my job is just to find 1,001 ways to say the similar thing, and in a way that's going to drop in and feel like a good fit for that client. And that's where a lot of where my intuition and feeling into it comes. Because the themes are all so simple. Be the witness, unconditional love, embrace all of you, welcome all of you, and be soft rather than all the tension and the hardness and the rejection and pain, because we are the ones who are perpetuating all those childhood dynamics of how it is in those first 7 years, formative years of life, because the prefrontal cortex doesn't form until age 7. There's no logic and reasoning ability until then. So children are just this ball of emotions that just want to be loved. So anything that happens, they can't rationalize and say, oh, mum was having a bad day. So they get enmeshed and entangled and can't differentiate between the actions and behaviors of the adults around them, because the adults around them are the ones who were ideally meant to be holding that space. So forevermore, we recreate these cycles and patterns of expansion and contraction, which some people call it the inner child and the adults, and we're wanting to reinforce the positive behaviors. We're wanting to reparent ourselves. Yet we get to a point in time where instead of identifying and labeling it as, oh, mum did that when I was 2 years old, or dad didn't do that when I was 2 years old, the cycles do repeat, yet we see them as patterns in us that either expand or contract. So instead of idolizing and idealizing the goal and needing to be perfect and get everything 100% correct all of the time, because that's like the parent that we never had, you know, or we didn't have parents. And can we really be that idealized parent to ourselves? Because that's our self-talk, that's our self-nurturing, because our parents may even not be here anymore. And they are simply other human souls that brought us through them.
Yeah.
And there's whole other theories, because I have gone into past lives, and all these things have come in my journey that have helped me to understand more why it is so, why I've had these behaviors, and why I've had such difficulties literally being a functional human being in this world. So I've needed to continuously strive more below and more within in order to be this to be this person. So it is partly past life karmic stuff that I've brought in, patterns that have come in. Yes, it is partly, you know, I'm a number 11 in numerology, which is all about, one is all about learning about themselves. And I'm also I'm a spiritual leader in this life, and part of, you know, the flip side of that coin is some very, very early childhood wounding that kind of took me into a very dissociated state from a very early age. So the gift of that is that spiritual channeling and that ability to really delve into those realms and see a very, very different perspective. And the challenge has been being present. That's why it's my job to be present. I spend the first half of my day doing practices to tune my energy, and it keeps me highly accountable being there for my clients, because I need to walk my talk. There's no room for, I'm just going to have an off day. Like, I do feel the feelings, of course, when I have the contractive parts in, yet it doesn't even occur to me to not be curious what's around it, and to see it as an opportunity for being more connected with life.
It's you talk about expansion and contraction, and we've talked about that. You know, we've talked about it a lot in our work together. I've got a couple of questions that I'd love to understand, kind of from a practical application perspective. Is number one, you've applied a lot of different types of treatments, like, I guess, when you do body work. I'd love you to just sort of unpack some of, because sometimes you've had my legs up in the air and I'm beating pillows, but sometimes you're walking up and down my back, or it's just on one leg, or you're just digging under my shoulder blade. So there's almost, there's a physical element to the work, and then sometimes I'm working almost totally in what I think is my imagination. And, you know, I'd love to know how you have collected those actual, like, what do you call them? Are they clinical practices that you utilize and apply? And I know you don't prescribe exactly what you're going to do. You just go every session when I'm present, I'll just do, but you didn't make that shit up. It's like or did you? I don't know. I'd love to know, you know, yeah, how did you add to your toolkit over the years? Like, it's, you do a psychology degree, we get it. You do that elective, you read those books, you do that exam, you pass it, tick, you know. But how have you collected those practices that you apply in your sessions?
So, well, I think I mentioned that I first met my body psychotherapy teacher, Robert Kirby, in 2005. And he left Australia in 2021, the end of that year. So I did non-stop trainings and mentoring with him, group trainings. So I got to see how he worked firsthand for, 17 or so years. And until I started doing it myself, I had the same perception that it's like he was constantly pulling a rabbit out of his hat. And then when I started doing it for myself, then I'm like, that's what it is. So I knew that he'd studied a lot. So there are a lot of genuine modalities that other practitioners use that I've also studied. Constellation work, which people know as family constellations. And in one-on-one sessions, I create abstractions of that so that we can observe consciousness. To me, it's similar like when you pull out a tarot deck card. We're just really getting a sense of how that's showing up, what the truth is for this time and what's purposeful to see. 9-position brain spotting, which is similar to the EMDR work that trauma therapists use, because
for our listeners, EMDR is that rapid eye movement or something? What's EMDR?
It's about the connection of visually the position of the eye and how that goes to, again, in the body, that connection to traumatic episodes.
Yeah.
And some people call it parts work, which is part of the family systems, called it voice dialogue. So I'm kind of giving these references because it's like there's nothing hugely new under the sun, yet different schools and different practitioners have kind of given it their label and taught it a certain way, because it's all ways of observing parts of ourselves. It's all ways of observing consciousness, so that we can really go into it with no apologies. And then we can practice moving away from that, so that we can actually allow, without the judgment that usually goes in. It's like, oh my God, what's this going? I'm going to be consumed by this grief, or I'm going to be consumed and turn into a ball of flaming anger, and no one's going to like me.
Yeah, and I'm never going to be able to come back from it. And and isn't that the thing? It's like, just like so many people, they know it's there and they want to expunge it, expel it, move past it, get rid of it. But it's become so big and so repressed, and so they've held it for so long that they're terrified that it will consume them. And that, but what we don't realize, and that this work does, is that it actually helps you literally dispel it, and whether it's, so
you need to grow up. Because, have you ever met that adult who biologically their age is whatever it is, but emotionally their age?
Oh my God.
All this unresolved, unfinished business. That keeps them in a state where they're still waiting to be cared for in that way. There's still an expectation that those needs are going to be met. So until you meet them your goddamn self, then consciously or unconsciously, you're somehow trying to hook other people in to meet those needs. So this is actually taking responsibility for your life, because it's the child that's frozen in time and space that felt like it was too much, because there was nothing that demonstrated to them that it was okay to be with those feelings. The adults around them may have been uncomfortable with witnessing that and just, suppress them and be like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, we don't talk about feelings in this house.
you should be grateful, or just, just go to bed, or just, shoved a block of chocolate in their mouth, or
Oh,
whatever.
hello, Mum.
So
Yeah.
really, it's the child in us that's overwhelmed and doesn't believe that those feelings are safe to be present, because
Right.
something outside of them told them that that was the case, and they therefore believed it. Because as a child, your adults, they are your mentors, they're your role models for how to live your goddamn life. And as adults, whilst we might listen to a Melissa Ambrosini show, or watch whatever else, or hear Oprah or Nathy G, it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to become that. So the journey of becoming that is the work.
Yeah.
And we can't control it. We can't control how loud the yell might be that wants to come out, or how many mils of tears are gonna.
Yeah, how many boxes of tissues you're going to need to,
It's
or if anything will happen at all.
that's what surrender really is. So I mention this because my journey with body psychotherapy started in 2005, and I discovered that by doing the body work was the way that I genuinely felt free in myself, and I felt that relief. And over time, I started to feel more. There was more nuance. There was more expression that came into my face. There's actually photos of me from high school and early childhood where I look like, what is it, like a zombie.
Wow.
So, and people used to say to me, actually, when I was doing my psychology degree, they would say that they couldn't tell what I was thinking. That expression of having a poker face.
Yeah.
So something in me had learnt to survive in life, what we call in the core energetics body psychotherapy, what we call the mask. Literally, I was literally wearing a mask. I literally had a poker face, so that however I felt was so internalized that nobody else could actually perceive that. And that is what I decided as a very, 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 my psyche and soma decided and froze and literally split. That's what the dissociative.
And you talk about that dissociative thing. We talked about it is like where blocks of memory. They're just not there. And I thought it was all partying and all the drugs I took in the 90s, reason I couldn't remember things. But in fact, through the work, I realized that so much of my early childhood had been so chaotic and traumatic, not for the malevolence of the people that loved me and cared for me, but just because they were in chaos and trauma themselves. So they didn't know how to care for that, that young person who relied on them for that regulation. I'd love to know. So what I'm hearing also is that in terms of the way you apply the modalities that you will choose to deploy in any given session, is you've amassed them over time on your own healing journey and your own journey of exploration. And there's almost a transference, and it's a somatic transference of knowledge. So like the psychology degree, you had, clinical stuff where you talked stuff through and you learnt how to ask those questions and you learnt what to listen for and you learnt language patterns.
And I've literally witnessed my teacher over 17 years working mostly in groups and receiving one-on-ones. So I've witnessed multiple other therapists and healers in the industry and how it is that they work. So I've pretty much absorbed it through osmosis.
Yes,
And
yeah.
it's been a process of courage and also a process of making it my own, because if a client came and saw me when I officially started my business in 2017, and how I work now is really very different, because as I've changed and evolved, how I work with clients has also changed and evolved, because it's not a linear path by any means. So whilst I have this bank of modalities, that's really how what I say spirit or source gives to me to use as a starting point. I say this, just like you add a dash of salt to your dish and you don't know if you're going to add more later. Because a lot of the healing is about that rapport that is created with the client. It's not necessarily about the modality, because trust and connection is what we all want. We wanted it back when the wounds came in place, and we want it now to really help, stop and create a new way, instead of just band-aiding over with drugs and alcohol and sex or food or scrolling social media, all the myriad of ways that we zone out and avoid and float on that surface, rather than kind of holding space for all that is.
And I'm curious. We'll take a little break in a moment, but I'm curious. Is there ever a scenario where people come along and can have a few sessions and kind of, I don't know, break the back or crack open the nut or do that? Or is it a commitment that it's not just a metro from Circular Quay to Town Hall. You've really got to get on the Garn and go from one coast to the other. Is there, is it one or the other?
What I'm hearing, to me, the key word here is about commitment. And when you commit to yourself and when you commit to the journey and process of your life, that's when you get the results.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to jump off a cliff, you're not going to get to the bottom if you don't commit to taking that step
Well, you're certainly not going to get to the bottom effectively or safely. You might just kind of bounce down the thing if you kind of, yeah.
It can feel a bit like that. It can, the word surrender and let go and
which is really hard for people to do. It's really difficult
because life has become busier and busier, and to stay focused and to stay choosing that this option is really going to help you, what you could say move the needle, is really going to help you to transition and make that difference in your life. Because until you really commit and connect with something, like I liken it to, I've recently taken up a different dance style and a different fitness practice, and I know from all the yoga and all the other dances, if I don't do it a minimum twice a week, I'm not going to learn anything. Once a week, it's like, oh, this is fun, la 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 la. There's other people here, isn't this joyous? But I'm not going to progress. So I say this because there've been some instances where I've had people who've already had a lot of life experience and done a lot of what we call the work before. So they might come and have one session, or they might have a session casually here and there, but that's because they've already done the groundwork. And this is more like just a top up for them. And because they already are so finely tuned with their instrument of their body that they know what they need. But those who don't, you got to dig.
Yeah, and it's really hard. I mean, so there's words I'm tapping into. Commitment's a big one, and we talk about you talk about doing the work,
and it's an investment. It's an investment in yourself. Every last dollar that I've had in my life, I've spent on my self-development. You know, I live in a humble abode. Nathan, you've seen I work from home. And that's because my number one priority has been self-growth.
Yeah.
And that's what I offer to others, because I got to a point where I couldn't not.
And how do you self-care? I mean, when you mentioned before earlier, you said you spend the first half of your days essentially getting ready to be able to be present for whatever people bring into the room. I've got a good friend of mine is a couples psychotherapist, and as part of their kind of professional duty of care or whatever it is, she has to go away, or she goes away. I don't know whether it's 2 or 3 or once a quarter or whatever, but she has to go and see a therapist, and she has to go away and, kind of decompress. And it's part of her professional practice to maintain being able to hold that space. How do you, I mean, I guess your self-care is just your ongoing life choices. But like, how do you back up after you've had a couple of really intense sessions?
Well, I went dancing last night.
So you like that, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's just like dancing is dancing it out. It's literally expelling, getting the crap out, isn't it?
Yeah. So for me, dancing is more like the big excavation. If I know there's a lot of things, if there's something new I've committed to that's really going to challenge the trajectory of where I'm investing my own time and energy in a way that feels kind of uncomfortable, because I'm used to having more kind of free flow, yet I'm willing to go there because, as I've said, the results come from that commitment and where I invest my time and energy. And so, yeah, I went out dancing last night. I spend as much time in nature as possible. I live in a very convenient location close to the CBD and close to a train station, but also close to the beach. So swimming, exercise, doing my own breathwork practices, yoga. I've recently taken up pole dancing, calisthenics. So it's really, if I have, say 2 clients more closely booked together, I might, get outside, get my feet on the earth, because I'm on the 6th floor right now. So it's getting that natural sunlight. It's making sure that the food that I eat is balancing out my blood sugar. I don't eat sugar. So the way that I nourish my body, every morning I have half a liter of celery juice, so everything, and how I've taken care of that has also shifted over the years, and needing to listen and fine tune what works, what slightly different meditation practices, and how I move my body. And
I love what you've said about listening. Sorry, I just interrupted you when I was talking about listening. But you listen. You listen to, well, you hear yourself, and I think we all do hear ourselves, but you listen and you pay attention. And I think that's, people know what they need to do.
It's a process of becoming so astutely aware of the consequences of not listening that has made me the practice of listening more finely attuned, because again, there's a saying, it's like the body will whisper gently and then we might hear or we might not hear. You know, if
Wow.
you're about to get sick, you might just start to feel a little bit of a stuffiness or a bit of a heaviness in the chest, or your head gets a little bit achy. And then you're like, oh, but I've got to finish this task. And then suddenly it's 10 p.m. or whatever, and your sleep hygiene's out, and you're like, oh, but I need all the reasons why this is so important. And we push ourselves, and I've done it myself. So we push beyond the messages from the body, which is speaking to us gently. And then when we don't listen, the sledgehammer comes out, and then, you know, a lot more serious illnesses come out. And I believe this is also why you mentioned the idea of COVID, because people are looking for more expansive and deeper reasons to heal themselves in their body, which they know has that on-flow effect of their mind, which has the like if you've got a sore back and you're not going to the toilet properly, how do you speak to those you love? Does it even sound like you love them, like in those moments of tension? And how do you treat yourself? Do you really treat yourself with kindness and compassion? Or does the irritation come in, that contractedness of the unmet needs? Do they come out and think, oh God, they should be making me breakfast in bed right now? All the justifications come in. And chronic illness and disease, I need to keep the hope up that there's enough of the light, there's enough of the solutions coming out there, and that people can have access to this information to genuinely care for themselves. Because the physical symptoms flow on to the mental and emotional symptoms. There's no division. Medical science, the Cartesian split between the body and the mind, it's not true anymore. we can't pretend that it's not true. So all the autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease, all these things, often the root cause comes back to such similar things, which is a whole nother topic. Yet it's the reason why, my vision, I am my business. My vision is wanting to create a beautiful retreat center on the land to integrate a lot of my experiences of living and growing in a permaculture
it's such a beautiful vision. I love it. Yeah.
And there's more to it. But really, clients come and see me and have 1.5 hour sessions, which is longer than an average session. Normally, I get asked, oh, do you take Medicare rebates and all these things? A psychologist will see you for 50 minutes so that they can have their back-to-back sessions. And then, ironically, they actually charge more than me, even with that rebate. So there's a bit of a false economy. I like to offer a spaciousness, because spaciousness is that adult place that we're
wanting. That's the expansion that you're talking about, isn't it? That people,
not wanting, because anytime we try to squeeze in the feelings, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I've got 5 minutes let's see if we can cry now. Let's see if we can move this so that I can move on with the rest of my day. But as soon as we put those conditions on, as soon as we really tighten up the time frame, then all of us does not feel welcome. Those parts that have been hidden and numb and frozen and locked in space and time, they're like, oh, well, we still have to behave a certain way, so we're just going to stay back here. And it comes out in very nasty ways often in life.
Yeah, I think that's a good time to pause, because I can, hang on, I'm just going to pause this.